First you start with strips that are a ½ inch wider than the finished size, and finished is after the quilt is sewn together. You layer your strips right sides together, put the lighter strip on top. Take one of the papers out of the pack, and lay it on top of your strips. Now you'll notice the fabric strips are the same width as the Thangles template. So line up the edges and then pin the template to the strips. Now it's important to keep the edges lined up and to pin everything nice and straight. But just put 3 or 4 pins someplace where you're not going to sew over them. The cutting line is a convenient place. See, and now you're ready to sew. Thangles are printed on a special paper that tears so easily you don't have to shorten up the stitch length to get the paper off. So you can just use a normal stitch length and a normal needle. Now to save time, you can chain sew Thangles. That's why they're laid out in strips the way they are. Now it's time to cut your Thangles apart, and you cut on the solid lines. If you look closely, you'll see a white line that runs down the center of the larger black line, and that's what you're aiming for. That white line helps you find the center of it in the shadow of a ruler. Now you cut the two halves apart, and this cut doesn't have to be that accurate because it just ends up in the seam allowance. You'll notice that there's only one ear instead of two. You can cut these off before you press or after. If you'd like to cut them off before you press, just make a right angle cut where the thread runs off the edge. If you want to, you can stack them up and cut them all off at once. Now it's time to press your Thangles open, and it's important to leave the paper on while you press. That will stabilize the bias seam and keep it from stretching. We've used a special heat-proof ink on the paper so you don't have to worry about the ink coming off on your ironing board or on your fabric. Just open up each half square triangle and press it flat. Because we pressed with the paper on, that heat set the stitches, so even after we tear the paper off, the half square triangles will come out perfect. Now it's time to take the paper off, and the paper will come off easily. One way to do it is to pinch in the corner and just pull the paper off. Another method is known as the Texas tear, and that's where you pinch in the center, placing your fingernail right on the thread, grab the tip of the paper and just pull it towards you, and it comes off quickly and cleanly. You'll notice now that the seam allowance automatically went towards the dark side. That's why in the beginning you put the lighter strip on top. And there you have it, perfect half square triangles. Besides making perfect half square triangles, Thangles makes block construction fast and easy. Normally when you make blocks, you'd have to make your half square triangles separately from the squares because of the 7/8 rule. Thangles gets rid of that, so you can now make all the pieces of the block from the same set of strips. See how the half square triangle ends up the same size as the strip it's made from? That means you can use that same strip to make the square parts of the block and the half square triangles. Thangles are very economical to use. They're only $5 a pack, regardless of size, and one pack will generally make a full-size quilt, depending somewhat on the pattern. Thangles come in sizes from a 1/2 inch to 6-inch finished. The size of Thangles refers to the finish size, which means after the quilt is sewn together. In this case, a 2-inch finished half square triangle is 2.5 inches before it's sewn together. You can also make quarter square triangles with Thangles. And the neat thing about making a quarter square triangles with Thangles is that if you need a 2-inch quarter square, you can make it using 2-inch Thangles. First make 2 half square triangles. Then you layer them right sides together, light to dark, dark to light. Make sure the 2 seams nest together tightly, and that way you'll get a perfect point in the middle. You'll be sewing corner to corner across the seams, and the Thangles paper will show you where to sew and where to cut. Cut 1 Thangles unit from a strip and lay it on your half square triangles corner to corner so the sewing line crosses the seams. And line up the edges carefully and then pin the template to the strip. Now the paper will run a little long over the edge. Don't worry about that. In fact, if you want to, you can just tear off the excess. And now, just like regular Thangles, you sew on the dotted lines. If you sew both sides, you'll end up with a bonus quarter square triangle that's 3/4 of an inch smaller. Now you cut them apart on the solid line. Open them up. There's your perfect quarter square triangle. Now you press, leave the paper on. That will stabilize the bias seams. And then tear the paper off just like before. Here's a neat trick to make your quarter square triangle lay flat. Just pull open that center point, open that one seam, and press it flat. With Thangles, you can make a quarter square triangle, you can make a half square triangle, or a square, all from the same strips.